I stood motionless in my driveway as flames consumed my old sedan. The HOA president stood by with her arms folded, wearing a smirk. "Maybe next time you'll reconsider joining," she mocked, oblivious to the fact that she had just committed arson against a man who had spent over a decade locking up criminals. What happens when neighborhood bullies pick the wrong person to mess with? After 23 years of tackling organized crime in Chicago, I was ready for some peace and quiet. Oakdale Heights seemed like the perfect place. Neat lawns, spotless homes, and the promise of suburban serenity. The move was uneventful. A few neighbors even brought over baskets to welcome me. But then I noticed her, Sandra Whitmore, standing across the street with a clipboard, eyeing my boxes as if they were some kind of criminal evidence. The next morning, at 7 a.m., there was a knock on my door. Sandra stood there, her pearl necklace gleaming against her tailored suit. "Welcome to Oakdale," she said, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, and I've got your membership papers." I flipped through the documents, 47 pages full of rules, regulations, and outrageous monthly fees for services that seemed minimal at best. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'll pass." Her smile faltered instantly. "Everyone joins the HOA, Mr. Carter. It's practically mandatory," she said, her voice cold. "Practically doesn't mean legally," I replied, handing the papers back to her. Her expression darkened. "You don't understand. The HOA is here to protect everyone's interests," she insisted. "I'm sure it is, but I'll take care of my property my way." "Thanks." Her composure cracked slightly. "That's unfortunate. People who don't join often find the HOA less cooperative." I'd heard that tone before from mobsters. "Is that a threat, Miss Whitmore?" I asked, keeping my cool. "It's just an observation," she replied, turning to leave. But before she went, she stopped and added, "By the way, your mailbox is 3 inches too tall according to our rules. You'll want to fix that." My mailbox was identical to everyone else's on the street. This wasn't about rules, it was about power. That evening, I found a note on my windshield, "Conform or get out." The next day, people who had been friendly before suddenly avoided me. I'd spent my career studying patterns of intimidation, and I recognized them instantly, even if they were wrapped in the glossy packaging of suburban life. What Sandra didn't yet realize was that she was picking on the wrong person. She was using the tactics of a crime syndicate against someone who had spent years taking down those very organizations. 3 weeks into my stand against the HOA, the psychological harassment ramped up. Each day brought a new complaint. Neighbors stopped by to advise me about community standards and property values. One afternoon, Bill Henderson, who lived 2 houses down, came to my door. "Look, I'm just trying to help," he said, glancing nervously behind him. "Before you, there were the Thompsons. They didn't join either. Their kids' bikes kept getting wrecked, and their dog got sick out of nowhere. They left within 3 months. I recognized the tactic, wrapped in concern but designed to scare. Instead of getting angry, I invited him in for coffee. "You seem worried, Bill," I said, subtly activating my phone's recording app. "How long have you lived in Oakdale?" I asked. 7 years, he said, nervously stirring his coffee. "Sandra runs a tight ship. Things work better when everyone follows the rules." I nodded thoughtfully. "And when they don't?" His eyes darted to the window. "Bad things happen. Car issues. Permit problems. People get isolated." "Sounds like an organized system," I said. Bill lowered his voice. "Sandra has connections at City Hall. Last year, the Millers questioned their assessment fees. The next thing they knew, inspectors found all these code violations that never existed before. And people just accept this." I asked, "What other choice do we have?" He sighed. "Sandra keeps files on everyone. She knows exactly how to push the right buttons." I leaned in closer. "How many families has she pushed out?" 6, at least, he admitted. His confession hung heavy in the air. "I shouldn't have said that," he whispered. "Actually, Bill," I said, revealing the recording on my phone, "I think you said exactly what needed to be said." His face drained of color. "She'll know I talked." "No, she won't," I assured him, "because you're now protected by something stronger than Sandra. Evidence." His eyes widened. "Evidence? Who are you?" he asked, clearly rattled. I smiled. Just a new neighbor who knows how to handle organized intimidation. As Bill left, visibly shaken, I felt a familiar satisfaction. I'd secured the first piece of evidence. The HOA wasn't just targeting a helpless homeowner. They were building the case against themselves. The discovery that Sandra had forced out 6 families gave me clear direction. This wasn't just about a petty neighborhood tyrant. This was a racketeering operation. I decided to approach this methodically, just like I had with criminal syndicates. First, surveillance. I set up cameras around my property, some obvious to deter her, some hidden to gather evidence. It paid off quickly. At 3:17 a.m., I received an alert. I checked my phone and saw Sandra, dressed in black, measuring my grass with a ruler and photographing my mailbox. Instead of confronting her, I documented everything and added it to my case file. Next came counterintelligence. I started walking the neighborhood before dawn, photographing violations at the homes of HOA board members. Jim Baker's fence was too tall. Treasurer Helen Porter had garden gnomes that didn't meet the rules. Sandra herself had non-compliant porch lights. The hypocrisy was staggering, and now I had the proof. I quietly used my federal connections to dig deeper. My former FBI colleague ran background checks on the board. Sandra had a sealed conviction for embezzlement from her previous HOA in Florida. Helen had been involved in an insurance fraud case. 3 other board members had questionable financial dealings. Sandra had carefully chosen a team of people she could control. It became clear when I followed the HOA's maintenance worker to a storage unit rented under Sandra's maiden name. While he was inside, I placed a small tracking device on his vehicle, a technique I had perfected over the years. The next day, I used a warrant I'd obtained from a judge who owed me a favor. Inside the storage unit, I found detailed files on every resident who had ever questioned Sandra's authority. Personal photos, financial records, and custom strategies to pressure each family. The most disturbing discovery was a section titled Elimination Successes, which contained records of the 6 families Sandra had driven out, complete with distress recordings and photos of their moving trucks, taken by someone celebrating their departure. This wasn't a simple HOA. It was a criminal operation, funded by dues and supported by a network of contractors, city officials, and even local cops who responded to nuisance complaints against targeted residents. Bank records revealed thousands of dollars funneled through shell companies for non-existent neighborhood improvement projects. Each piece of evidence tied together. Sandra hadn't just run a corrupt HOA. She had created a suburban version of organized crime. The familiar thrill of building a case against a criminal mastermind returned. Every discovery brought me closer to taking her down. The breakthrough came when I intercepted emails between board members about their special assessment fund, a slush fund used to pay off their enforcers. In one email, Sandra ordered Jim to disrupt my water service as a warning. It was the same tactic used by crime families to pressure businesses. Start with small inconveniences, then escalate to property damage, and eventually resort to violence. Sandra was following the same playbook, but against someone who had spent decades dismantling it. Her campaign against me intensified, with new tactics that would have impressed even the most ruthless crime bosses I had ever prosecuted. My water was turned off while I was in the middle of shower. My mail was tampered with or went missing. 3 times, dead birds were left on my welcome mat. Amateur moves, but they sent a clear message. The social isolation was the worst part. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. Children hurried away when I walked by. Invitations to events stopped. I had witnessed these tactics from mob families who try to turn communities against witnesses, but experiencing it firsthand revealed the true psychological toll. The HOA's monthly newsletter printed on glossy paper. As Sandra's tactics grew bolder, so did my resolve. Every step I took brought me closer to exposing the truth behind her suburban empire of fear and control. What started as a personal vendetta against one homeowner was unraveling into a case of systemic corruption. Each discovery felt like a victory, and each piece of evidence I gathered brought me closer to dismantling the HOA's stranglehold on Oakdale Heights. What Sandra never realized was that she had picked the wrong person to mess with, a man who spent his life bringing down crime. This was my fight now.